I can promise you that during the adolescent years, you're going to have some bumpy times. And I'm the last person in the world who means because there's something wrong with adolescence. I want you to understand what's happening at its most basic level. When you have a child, you're raising them in this warm and fluffy nest, right? And all that child has to do is go like this, and the birds, meaning you guys, are bringing them these juicy worms, and all their needs are met. And if life could stay like that, and your child could stay in your nest forever, you'd have the perfect relationship. But that's not the way the world works. So puberty strikes, and at some point, the child begins to notice that that nest is a little bit prickly. Why? Because they have to be ready to fly. At some point, they have to be willing to fly. And part of that process is also looking at the birds that are bringing them those juicy worms and kind of being embarrassed by the way they breathe, right? And then as adolescence continues and the child is ready to fly from the nest, they don't see that nest as prickly anymore. They see it as absolutely uninhabitable. Otherwise, they would never fly. And you need them to fly. It's how you get grandchildren. It's how they're going to get a job. They have to learn to fly. So that's why it's so important to really understand. And if I could put a little voice in your head, that's me when your kid is being less than completely pleasant, remind yourself, this is because they love me so much it hurts. They're pushing you away, not because they don't love you, not because they reject you, but because they have to figure out who they are on their own, flying on their own. And that means that exactly because they love you, they push you. Precisely because they cherish you and see you within them, they reject you. It is temporary. What you want ultimately to have is not an empty nest, right? And if when your kid begins moving against you or begins talking back to you and you begin hovering or make them feel horrible about the process, then, or you become over controlling rather than letting them learn to fly, then when they can fly, they're not going to want to come back home. That's when you have an empty nest. You know what I want you to have instead? I want you to grow up and describe your kids as in flight, right? Where they can journey around because they have independent wings, but they've always known that you supported the process. And when you've supported the process, they're going to come back to your house for some safe landings. Then your child's in flight and you have a lifelong, productive, positive relationship. There probably hasn't been a parent in the world who hasn't worried about their peer relationships. Why? Because we've always heard these words like peer pressure. We always assume that our children are innocent and that they're being influenced in a negative way by their peers. So that's not really the way to think about it. Peer pressure is not the way most parents think it works. It's not usually like smoke this or you're a loser. It's not like that. It's actually much more subtle. It's really about your child trying to figure out how to fit in with a particular group that they're hanging out with, right? And peer pressure can also be a very positive thing. It can also be pressure to focus on school, pressure to do good things in a religious setting, pressure to support the community, in that sense that pressure means fitting in with the environment. So what does that mean? It means that where you really have control is in helping your child find a healthy environment. And my suggestion to you is that there are multiple environments, because during adolescence, in each environment, kids might go against each other for a little while, and you never want your kid to be completely isolated. That's why it's good for your kid to be in an after-school program, in a religious setting, in a sports team, in addition to school, because they can go from one set of relationships to another. And that's very helpful, either if they're rejected in one peer group or influenced in a negative way by one peer group. If your kid doesn't have another set of kids with different values to go to, they're going to be stuck. So your main influence is not in saying, don't hang out with Johnny, right? Because that makes Johnny more attractive to a kid who's trying to figure out who they are on their own and away from you. Instead, it's in assuring that your kid has multiple settings that they can turn to and trust that with good values, they'll choose to. Next, I want you to think about peers when things aren't going well in two different categories. There's the peers from whom your child will learn life lessons, even if they get hurt, even if they make mistakes, they're still going to grow because they're basically a healthy group of kids who just need to learn how to fall down and get back up together. There, you influence them with values. But if you get in the way of those relationships, not only will your child not learn some basic life lessons, you actually won't be listened to because young people don't let you make personal decisions for them. But they do let you make personal decisions for them and are hungry for you to make personal decisions for them when the issue is around safety. So that's the other group. When there are truly peers that are putting your kid at risk for safety, then you jump right in, right? You didn't let your kid put their hand on their stove when they were 2 years old. You don't let them get in a car with 16-year-old drunk kids when they're 16 or 15. You don't let it happen because that's a hand on your stove experience. And if you frame it about safety, your kids will listen to you. But if you get in the way of those relationships that are basically healthy and that are just not your favorite things, it will backfire. So you work behind the scenes to make sure they have several groups to go to and that they have a very strong sense of your values and what it is, what traits, what character strengths they have that you value most. Because then you're going to see them wanting to develop those strengths. Because more than anything, during adolescence, we popular culture tells us the kids that peer pressure is the biggest influence on kids. That's just not true. The greatest influence on young people is their parents, right? So pressuring them doesn't work. Influencing them, guiding them, shaping them with your values absolutely works. Parents get angry at each other, at friends, and probably most of all at their kids. Because we don't like them? No, because we love them so intensely and so deeply. And our strongest emotions are reserved for those people we care the most about. That is a vital thing for you to remember, because if you act out of anger, it will backfire. Your kids won't listen to you. If you go to them and you lecture them or you punish them, then you're talking to the wrong part of their brain. You're talking to the part of their brain that's a tiger's attacking me or my mother's about to kill me part of the brain. And kids can't think. If they can't think when you're talking to that part of the brain, they're not going to make wise decisions. If they don't make wise decisions, you haven't taught them anything. You've punished them. You've unloaded your feelings on them, but you haven't guided or shaped them. So are you going to have moments of anger? Yes, you are. You're going to have moments of anger with your spouse and with your kids and with your best friend, right? That's what happens. So what do? Bring your best self to the table. Don't speak out of anger. Create space out of anger. Walk away, create space, take deep breaths to calm down your nervous system that says, I'm okay, I'm not under attack. Then remind yourself that the reason you experience anger so fully is because you cared so deeply. Then you begin bringing in your the loving side of you. And when you bring your loving side to the table, then your child will listen to you. Because more than anything, they're going to want to please you and they're going to understand. So if your language is, it's because I care about you so much that I worry about what you just did because it is not living up to who I know you can be. That's the way to frame things. And then you'll have much, much more influence if you come from a place of anger.